हे गाइस आज हम ट्रेडिंग इन द जोन ऑडियो बुक पे बात कर रहे हैं। मार्क डगलस ने जो लिखी थी, ट्रेडिंग साइकोलॉजी की बेस्ट बुक है। एंड चैप्टर 1 to चैप्टर 8 हम ऑलरेडी कवर कर चुके हैं वर्ड बाय वर्ड। एंड आज हम करेंगे चैप्टर 9। तो बिना किसी देरी के स्टार्ट करते हैं। लेट्स गो फॉर इट। Chapter 9, The Nature of Beliefs. At this point, if you can sense the benefits of adopting the 5 fundamental truths about trading, then the task is to learn how to properly integrate these truths into your mental system as core beliefs that are not in conflict with any other beliefs you may hold. At first glance, this may seem like a daunting task, and under other circumstances, I would agree with you. But it won't be, because in chapter 11 I will give you a simple trading exercise specifically designed to properly install the truths as beliefs at a functional level. A functional level is one where you find yourself just naturally operating out of a carefree state of mind, perceiving exactly what you need to do and doing it without hesitation or internal conflict. However, I do have a word of caution for those of you who have already looked at the exercise. On the surface, the trading exercise looks so simple that you may be tempted to do it now, before you thoroughly understand the implications of what you are doing. I strongly suggest that you reconsider. There are some subtle yet profound dynamics involved in the process of learning how to install new beliefs and change any existing beliefs that are in conflict with the new ones. Understanding the trading exercise itself is easy. Understanding how to use the exercise to change your beliefs is another matter entirely. If you do the exercise without understanding the concepts presented in this chapter and the next, you will not achieve the desired results. It is also important that you not take for granted the amount of mental effort you may have to expend to train your mind to fully accept these principles of success, regardless of how well you understand them. Remember Bob, the CTA who believed he thoroughly understood the concept of probabilities but didn't have the ability to function from a probabilistic perspective. Many people make the mistake of assuming that once they understand something, the insight inherent in their new understanding automatically becomes a functional part of their identity. Most of the time, understanding a concept is only a first step in the process of integrating that concept at a functional level. This is especially true of concepts that deal with linking in probabilities. Our minds are not naturally wired to be objective or to stay in the now moment. This means we have to actively train our minds to think from these perspectives. In addition to the training involved, there may be a number of conflicting beliefs to work through. Conflicting beliefs will have the effect of sabotaging your best intentions to operate from an objective state of mind or to experience the now moment opportunity flow. For example, let's say you have spent years learning how to read the markets or spent large sums of money developing or buying technical systems just so you could find out what was going to happen next. Now you have come to understand that you don't have to know what's going to happen next, and that even trying to know will detract from your ability to objective or to stay in the moment. What we have is a direct conflict between your old belief that you need to know what will happen next to be successful and your new understanding that you don't need to know. Now, will your new understanding suddenly neutralize all the time, money, and energy expended or reinforcing the belief that you need to know? I wish it were that easy, and from some lucky few it may be. If you will recall, in chapter 4, when I talked about psychological distance in relationship to software code, I said that some traders may already be so close to these new perspectives that all they need is to put together a few of the missing pieces to create a aha experience. However, based on my experience of working with well over 1,000 of traders, I can say that most are not close to these perspectives at all. For those of you who are not, it may take a considerable amount of mental work. to properly integrate your new understandings about trading into your mental environment. The good news is that ultimately the exercise I present in chapter 11 will install the 5 fundamental truths and resolve many of the potential conflicts, but only if you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. This is the subject of this and the next chapter. The origins of a belief. What can we learn about the nature of beliefs, and how can we use that knowledge to create a mindset that fosters our desire to be a consistently successful trader? These are the two questions I am going to focus on answering in this chapter. First, let's look at the origin of our beliefs. As you may recall, memories, distinctions, and beliefs exist in the form of energy, specifically structured energy. Earlier, I lumped these three mental components together to illustrate that number one, memories, distinctions, and beliefs do not exist as physical matter. Number two, that the cause and the effect relationship that exists between ourselves and the external environment brings these components into existence. And number three, how the cause and effect relationship reverses so that we can perceive in the external environment what we have learned about. To get all the origins of our beliefs, we are going to have to unbundle these components to illustrate the difference between a memory and a belief. The best way to do this is to imagine ourselves in the mind of an infant. I would think that at very beginning of a child's life, the memories of his experiences would exist in their purest form. By that I mean that the memories of what he has seen, heard, smelled, or touched, or tasted exist in his mind as pure sensory information that is not organized or attached to any specific words or concepts. Therefore, I am going to define a pure memory as sensory information stored in its original form. A belief, on the other hand, is a concept about the nature of the way the external environment expresses itself. A concept combines pure sensory information with a symbol system we call language. For example, most infants have a pure memory of how it feels to be lovingly nurtured by a parent. But it isn't until the infant is taught to link or associate certain words with the pure sensory information stored in his memory that he will form a concept about how it feels to be lovingly nurtured. The phrase "life is wonderful" is a concept. By themselves, the words make up a meaningless collection of abstract symbols. But if a child is either taught or decides to connect these words to his positively charged feelings of being nurtured, then the letters are no longer a collection of abstract symbols and the words are no longer as an abstract phrase. Life is wonderful becomes a definitive distinction about the nature of existence or the way the world works. By the same token, if the child didn't get enough nurturing relative to his needs, he could just as easily link his feelings of emotional pain to a concept like life isn't fair or the world is an awful place. In any case, when the positive or negative energy from our memories or experiences become linked to a set of words we call a concept, the concept becomes energized and as a result is transformed into a belief about the nature of reality. If you consider that concepts are structured by the framework of a language and energized by our experiences, it becomes clear why I refer to beliefs as a structured energy. When a belief comes into existence, what does it do? What is its function? In some ways, it seems ludicrous to ask those questions. After all, we all have beliefs. We are constantly expressing our beliefs both verbally and through our actions. Furthermore, we are constantly interacting with other people's beliefs as they express them. Yet, if I ask you, what exactly does a belief do? Chances are your mind will go blank. On the other hand, if I were to ask about the functions of your eyes, ears, nose, or teeth, you would have no problem answering. Since beliefs are such important component parts of our makeup. It certainly has to be one of the life's great ironies that they are also the least thought about and understood. What I mean by least thought about is if we have a problem with one of our body parts, we naturally focus our attention on that part and think about what we need to do to fix the problem. However, it doesn't necessarily occur to us that the problems we may be having with the quality of our lives are rooted in our beliefs. This lack of consideration is a universal phenomenon. One of the prominent characteristics of beliefs is that they make what we experience seem self-evident and beyond question. In fact, if it weren't for your intense desire to experience consistent success as a trader, it's unlikely you would be delving into this topic at all. Usually, it takes years of extreme frustration before people begin examining their beliefs as the source of their difficulties. However, even though beliefs are an intricate part of our identity, you don't have to take this process of self-analysis so personally. Consider the fact that none of us was born with any of our beliefs. They were all acquired in a combination of ways. Many of the beliefs that have the most profound impact on our lives were not even acquired by us as an act of free will, they were instilled by other people. And it probably won't come as a surprise to anyone that usually the beliefs that cause us the most difficulty are those that were acquired from others without our conscious consent. By that I mean beliefs that we acquired when we were too young and uninformed to realize the negative implications of what we were being taught. Regardless of the source of our beliefs, once they are born into existence, they are basically function in the same way. Beliefs have certain characteristics, ways in which they do their jobs, not unlike the various parts of our bodies. For example, if you compare my eyes and your eyes, or my hands and your hands, or my red blood cells and your red blood cells, we can see that they are not exactly the same, but they have the characteristics in common that cause them to function in similar ways. By the same token, a belief that life is wonderful will perform its function in the same way as a belief that life is awful. The beliefs themselves are different, and the effect that each has on the quality of holder's life will be vastly different, but both beliefs will function in exactly the same manner. Beliefs and their impact on our lives. In the broader sense, our beliefs shape the way we experience our lives. As I have already said, we are not born with any of our beliefs. They are acquired, and as they accumulate, we live our lives in a way that reflects what we have learned to believe. Consider how different your life would be if you had been born in a culture, religion, or political system that has very little, if anything, in common with the one you were born into. It might be hard to imagine, but what you would have learned to believe about the nature of life and how the world works may not be the remotely similar to what you currently believe. Yet, you would hold these other beliefs with the same degree of certainty as your current beliefs. How beliefs shape our lives. Number one, they manage our perception and interpretation of environmental information in a way that is consistent with what we believe. Number two, they create our expectations. Keep in mind that an expectation is a belief projected into some future moment. Since we can't expect something we don't know about, we could also say that an expectation is what we know projected into some future moment. Number three, anything we decide to do or any outward expression of behavior will be consistent with what we believe. Finally, our beliefs shape how we feel about the results of our actions. There isn't much about the way we function that beliefs don't play a major role in. So what I am going to do now is give you an example I used in my first book, The Disciplined Trader, to illustrate the various functions of a belief. In the spring of 1987, I was watching a locally produced television program called Gotcha Chicago. It was about some local celebrities who played practical jokes on one another. In one segment of the program, the TV station hired a man to stand on the sidewalk along with Michigan Avenue holding a sign that read "Free money today only." The TV station gave the man a considerable amount of cash with instructions to give the money to anyone who asked for it. Now, when you consider that Michigan Avenue is one of the busiest areas of the city, and if we assume that most of the people who passed the man on the street could read the sign, how many people would you think took him up on his offer and asked him for some money? Of all the people who walked by and read the sign, only one person stopped and said, "Great, may I have a quarter to buy a bus transfer?" Otherwise, no one would even go near the man. Eventually, the man grew frustrated because people weren't reacting the way he expected them to. He started crying out, "Do you want any money? Please take my money. I can't give it away fast enough." Everyone just kept walking around him as if he didn't exist. In fact, I noticed that several people went out of their way to avoid him. As a man wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase approached, he went right up to him and said, "Would you like some money?" The man responded, "Not today." Really frustrated now, he shot back, "How many days did this happen? Would you please take this?" As he tried to hand the man some cash, the man responded with a terse no and walked on. What was going on here? Why wouldn't anyone ask for the money? If we assume that most or all of the passerby could read the sign but still didn't make any effort to get the money, then one possible explanation for their behavior is that they just didn't care about the money. This is extremely unlikely, though, considering how much of our lives is devoted to the pursuit of money. If we agree that people could read the sign and that the money is very important to most of us, then what could have stopped these people from helping themselves? The environment was making available an experience that most people would love to have, someone giving them money with no strings attached. Yet everyone walked by, oblivious to what was awaiting them. They must not have been able to perceive what was available. That's hard to imagine, because the sign clearly stated "free money today only." However, it's not hard to imagine if you consider that most people have a belief that free money doesn't exist. If free money really doesn't exist, then how does someone reconcile the obvious contradiction between the belief and the sign saying that it does? That's easy. Just decide the man with the sign is crazy. What else could account for such bizarre behavior if, in fact, free money doesn't exist? The reasoning process that could compensate for the contradiction might go something like this. Everyone knows getting money with no string attached rarely happens. Certainly not from a stranger on one of the busiest streets in the city. In fact, if the man were really giving away money, he would already be mobbed. He might even be endangering his life. He must be crazy. I had better take a wide path around him. Who knows what he might do? Notice that every component of the thought process described is consistent with the belief that free money doesn't exist. Number one, the words "free money" were neither perceived nor interpreted as they were intended from the environment's perspective. Number two, deciding the person with the sign must be crazy created an expectation of danger, or at least a perception that caution was warranted. Number three, purposefully altering one's path to avoid the person with the sign is an action that is consistent with the expectation of danger. Number four, how did each person feel about the outcome? That's difficult to say without knowing each person individually, but a good generalization would be that they felt relieved that they successfully avoided an encounter with a crazy person. The feeling of relief that resulted from avoiding a confrontation is a state of mind. Remember that how we feel is always the absolute truth. But the beliefs that prompt any particular state of mind may not be the truth with respect to the possibilities available from the environment's perspective. Relief from confrontation was not the only possible outcome in this situation. Imagine how different the experience would be if they believed that the free money exists. The process described above would be the same, except it would make the belief that free money exists seem self-evident and beyond question, just as it made the belief that free money doesn't exist seem self-evident and beyond question. A perfect example would be one person who said, "Great, may I have a quarter for a bus transfer?" When I saw this, I had the anybody for a quarter. A panhandler is someone who definitely believes in the existence of free money, therefore his perception and interpretation of the sign were exactly what was intended by the TV station. His expectation and behavior were consistent with his belief that free money exists. And how would he feel about the results? He got his quarter. So I would assume he felt a sense of satisfaction. Of course, what he didn't know is that he could have gotten a lot more. There is another possible outcome for our scenario. Let's look at a hypothetical example of someone who believes that free money doesn't exist, but who takes a what if approach to the situation. In other words, some people can be so intrigued and curious about the possibilities that they decide to temporarily suspend their belief that free money doesn't exist. This temporary suspension allows them to act outside the boundaries created by a belief in order to see what happens. So instead of ignoring the man with the sign, which would be a hypothetical person's first inclination, he walks up to him and says, "Give me $10." The man promptly pulls a $10 bill out of his pocket and gives it to him. What happens now? How does he feel, having experienced something unexpected that completely contradicted his belief? For most people, the belief that free money doesn't exist is acquired through unpleasant circumstances, to put it mildly. The most common way is being told that we can't have something because it's too expensive. How many times does the typical child hear? Who do you think you are anyway? Money doesn't grow on trees. In other words, it is probably a negatively charged belief. So the experience of having money handed to him with no strings attached and without any negative comments would likely to create a state of mind of pure elation. In fact, most people would be so happy that they would feel compelled to share that happiness and this new discovery with everyone they knew. I can imagine him going back to his office or going home, and the moment he encounters someone he knows, the first words out of his mouth will be, "You won't believe what happened to me today." And even though he desperately wants those he meets to believe his story, they probably won't. Why? Because their belief that free money doesn't exist will cause them to interpret this story in a way that negates its validity. To take this example a little further, imagine what would happen to this person's state of mind if it occurred to him that he could have asked for more money. He is in a state of pure elation. However, the moment he thought either pops into his mind or someone he relates his story to offers the idea that he could have asked for a lot more money, his state of mind will immediately shift to a negatively charged stage of regret or despair. Why? He tapped into a negatively charged belief about what it means to miss out on something or not get enough. As a result, instead of being happy or what he got, he will think what he could have had but didn't get. Beliefs versus the truth. In all the three of these examples, everybody experienced their own unique version of the situation. If asked, each person would describe what he or she experienced from their perspective, as if it were the only true and valid version of the reality of the situation. The contradiction between these three versions of the truth suggests to me a larger philosophical issue that needs to be resolved. If beliefs limit our awareness of the information being generated by the physical environment so that we perceive is consistent with whatever we believe, then how do we know what the truth is? To answer this question, we have to consider four ideas. The environment can express itself in an infinite combination of ways. When you combine all the forces of nature interacting with everything created by humans, then add to the forces generated by all the possible ways people can express themselves, the result is a number of possible versions of the reality that would surely overwhelm even the most open-minded person. Until we have acquired the ability to perceive every possible way in which the environment can express itself, our beliefs will always represent a limited version of what is possible from the environment's perspective, making our beliefs a statement about reality, but not necessarily a definitive statement of reality. If you find yourself taking exception to the second statement, then consider that if our beliefs were a true 100% accurate reflection of physical reality, then our expectations would always be fulfilled. If our expectations were always fulfilled, we would be in perpetual state of satisfaction. How could we feel other than happy, joyful, elated, and with a complete sense of well-being if physical reality was considered consistently showing up exactly as we expected it to? If you can accept the third statement as being valid, then corollary is also true. If we are not experiencing satisfaction, then we must be operating out of a belief or beliefs that don't work very well relative to the environmental conditions. Taking these four ideas into consideration, I can now answer the question, what is the truth? The answer is whatever works. If beliefs impose limitations on what we perceive as possible and the environment can express itself in an infinite combination of the ways, then beliefs can only be true to relative to what we are attempting to accomplish at any given moment. In other words, the relative degree of truth inherent in our beliefs can be measured by how useful they are. Each of us internally generated forces that compel or motivate us to interact with the physical environment. The particular set of steps we take to fulfill the object of our curiosity, needs, wants, desires, goals, or aspirations is a function of what we believe to be true in any given circumstance or situation. That truth, whatever it is, will determine the possibilities we perceive in relation to what is available from the environment's perspective. Number two, how we interpret what we perceive. Number three, the decisions we make. Number four, our expectations of the outcome. Number five, the action we take. And number six, how we feel about the results of our efforts. At any given moment, if we find ourselves in a state of satisfaction, happiness, or well being in a relation to whatever we are attempting to accomplish, we can say that our truth are useful because the process as stated above worked. What we perceived was not only consistent with our objective, it was also consistent with what was available from the environment's perspective. Our interpretation of the information we perceived resulted in a decision, expectation, and action that were in harmony with the environmental situation and circumstance. There was no resistance or counteracting force offered by the environment that would diminish the outcome we were trying to achieve. As a result, we find ourselves in a state of satisfaction, happiness, and well being. On the other hand, if we find ourselves in a state of dissatisfaction, disappointment, frustration, confusion, despair, regret, or hopelessness, we can say that relative to the environmental situation and circumstances, the beliefs we are operating from don't work well or at all and therefore are not useful. Simply put, The truth is a function of whatever works in a relation to what we are trying to accomplish at any given moment. So चैप्टर 9 में यही बता रहे हैं राइटर मार्क डगलस कि अगर आपको ट्रेडिंग में सक्सेसफुल होना है तो आपको बिलीव्स पे अपने काम करना है। आपके अंदर कोई डिससेटिस्फैक्शन, डिसअपॉइंटमेंट, फ्रस्ट्रेशन नहीं होना चाहिए एंड जो आपको सामने स्क्रीन पे दिख रहा है उसके हिसाब से आपको ट्रेड करना है। आप पहले से कोई एक्सपेक्टेशन नहीं रख सकते, क्योंकि अगर जैसी आपने एक्सपेक्टेशन रखी तो उस एक्सपेक्टेशन के हिसाब से अगर चीज़ें नहीं होंगी तो आपके माइंड जो है उस इन्फॉर्मेशन को ब्लॉक करेगा एंड वो चीज़ें दिखाने की कोशिश करेगा जो आपके एक्सपेक्टेशन के हिसाब से होने वाली है। और अगर जो चीज़ आपके एक्सपेक्टेशन के हिसाब से नहीं हो रही हैं उसको वो अवॉइड करेगा एंड कोशिश करेगा कि आपके एक्सपेक्टेशन से हिसाब से चलने लगे। तो आप मार्केट से फाइट करोगे, अपने स्टॉप लॉसेस को वाइड करोगे कि आप सही हो, मार्केट गलत है, और स्टॉप लॉस नहीं लोगे, जल्दी अपना नहीं काटोगे जो ट्रेड है अगर आप गलत हो तो ये सारी चीज़ों के लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है। अब इसके बाद चैप्टर 10 पे चलेंगे, अगली वीडियो में चैप्टर 10 कवर करेंगे। कोशिश करूँगा कि कल मैं फिर चैप्टर 10 पे बात करूँ। तो अभी तक के लिए यहीं पे रखते हैं, फिर मिलते हैं आपसे अगले वीडियो में। तब तक के लिए टेक केयर, सी यू, बाय।